morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this demo session for Ariba. Brief introduction about myself. I'm Arjun. I have close to 13 years of experience in the IT industry and about 7 years of experience as an Ariba consultant. I have worked on various Ariba solutions, done many implementations of SAP Ariba. Currently, I'm working as a lead with an MNC for a support project. In this session, we'll understand what is procurement, what are the types of procurement, what are the different solutions of Ariba, what is a source to pay cycle, and how SAP Ariba solution helps us to perform the various activities of the source to pay cycle. Then also I'll give you a quick walkthrough of the Ariba application. I'll log into Ariba, create some transactions, just to give you an idea of how Ariba looks like. Okay, just to let you know, Ariba is not a programming application. It is, a cloud-based application. You need not have any sort of programming background. Anyone can learn this Ariba application and become a consultant. First, we'll understand what is procurement, what are the types of procurement, what are the different solutions offered by SAP Ariba, what is source to pay, and how SAP Ariba is useful in performing the different activities that are involved in the source to pay cycle. Then at the end, we'll take a look at the Ariba application. Okay. So as I mentioned, Ariba is a cloud-based application. You need not have any sort of programming background to learn this application. So it is like any other, I would say mobile app that you install on your mobiles, right? So you need to spend time to understand the various features and how we can configure. So I would say it is a very, very easy application to learn, just that you have to put in some effort or some amount of time to practice it regularly. You will become a very good consultant. All you need is logical skills. Okay. So let's get started. So just to let you know, Ariba is a digital procurement application. Okay. With that being said, let's understand what is procurement first. So procurement is a function of a business which is responsible for securing the goods and services that are needed by any organization. Okay, so for example, let's say you're setting up a new IT organization. Now, for an IT organization, we need laptops. Laptops are the key components or the key aspect to run the organization, right? So whenever we are setting up the organization, we need to buy different commodities to set up the office. So purchasing all those goods and other services to run the organization is called procurement. Now, procurement is categorized into two types: direct procurement and indirect procurement. So let's understand what is direct procurement. So direct procurement is that aspect of procurement which is directly involved in the production of the finished good which the company sells to its end customers and generates revenue by selling that finished good. Okay, so let's take an example of a car manufacturing industry. Okay, so to manufacture the car, we need steel, right? Then we need tires, we need the paint, we need gear lever, nuts and bolts, steering wheel, right? And other, like example, brake pads. So all these components are necessary to manufacture the car. Agree? To manufacture the car, the company needs to purchase or procure all these materials from different vendors. Only if they have all these materials at their manufacturing site, they can go ahead and start the manufacturing of the car. When it comes to direct procurement, anything for a car manufacturing company, how is the company going to generate the revenue? By selling the car, right? After the car manufacturer has completed, it is going to sell that car to its end users or the customers, by which it is going to generate the revenue. So to manufacture the car, we have to purchase all these elements, or we have to procure all these items. So procuring all these elements, which is directly involved in the manufacture of the car itself or the finished good, is called direct procurement. So I'll just summarize it again. So any sort of procurement activity that is directly involved in the manufacture or directly involved in the finished good that the company is going to sell to its end customers and generate revenue is called direct procurement. Okay, so if we consider the example of a car manufacturing company, so we need steel, tires, and other materials to manufacture the car. So procuring all these raw materials to manufacture the car is direct procurement. So now let's understand what is indirect procurement. Okay, what is indirect procurement? So let's stick with the same example of the car manufacturing company. Now, in a car manufacturing company, there are other departments as well, right? Like we have the IT department, we have the sales department, then we have, let's say, legal department, HR, etc. Right? But these or people working in these departments are not manufacturing the car, right? They are not responsible for manufacturing the car, but these people are necessary to run the organization. And these people are working, the employees working in these departments also need some items or some goods and services to perform their activities. Agree? For example, let's consider the IT department. Yeah. So they will need laptops, right, to perform their duties, right? Likewise, even the sales team, legal department, every other department team will need the laptops to perform their duties. But is laptop going to help me in manufacturing the car? Is laptop needed to manufacture the car? No, right? It is not a raw material to manufacture the car. But the company needs laptop for other departments to perform their day-to-day activities. So the company also needs to procure these other items, example laptops, which are not involved directly in the production of the car, but are necessary to perform the day-to-day activities of the organization. So any procurement that is not directly involved in the production of the finished good, but is necessary to perform the day-to-day activities in a given organization is categorized as indirect procurement. So understood the difference between direct versus indirect procurement. Let's summarize what is procurement, direct procurement, and then indirect procurement. Okay. Then we will move on to the next section. So procurement is a business function responsible for securing all the goods and services needed by any organization. So why are we discussing procurement? Because Ariba is a digital procurement application. Okay. Ariba is an application which is used for procuring goods and services digitally. Okay. So that is why we are discussing procurement. So procurement is categorized as direct procurement and indirect procurement. Direct procurement is that aspect of procurement which is directly involved in the production of a finished good. When I say finished good, that good which the company sells to its customers and generates revenue. If we consider the example of a car manufacturing company, so we'll need these various raw materials like steel, tires, paint, air lever, steering wheel, brake pads, other materials to manufacture the car. So we need to procure or purchase these materials from different vendors. So procuring these raw materials, which is directly leading to manufacturing of the car, is categorized as direct procurement. Now, car is the finished good which the company is going to sell to its customers and generate the revenue. So that is direct procurement. So what is indirect procurement? Now, in a car manufacturing company, there will be other departments as well, like IT department, sales department, legal department, HR department, and other departments. Right? Now, these teams are not involved in manufacturing the car itself, right? But they also need some goods or services to perform their day-to-day. Example, we need laptops for an IT department or sales department. So they need to perform their duties using laptops. They also need internet connection. They also need tables. They also need pen and paper. They also need fans. They need water. So the company needs to procure these other items which are not directly involved in the manufacture of the car but are necessary to perform the day-to-day activities in a given organization. So any procurement that is not directly involved in the production of the finished good but is necessary to perform the day-to-day activities or to run the organization is categorized as indirect procurement. Now that we understood what is procurement, types of procurements, now let's understand where Ariba is helpful in the world of procurement. SAP Ariba supports indirect procurement. SAP Ariba is mainly used for indirect procurement, not direct procurement. Okay, so there are some solutions which offered by SAP Ariba that does support direct procurement, but to a certain extent only. Okay, so we are not going to discuss or cover those solutions of direct procurement in this course. We will only cover the solutions which cater to the indirect procurement. So these are the solutions that are used by many of the clients. Okay, these are the different solutions offered by SAP Ariba. So we have the sourcing solution, which is used to perform the sourcing activities. We have SAP Ariba Contracts, which is used for contracts management. We have SAP Ariba SLP, which is nothing but supplier life cycle and performance management. This solution is used to manage the vendors or suppliers that a company has. Then we have SAP Ariba Buying and Invoicing or Procure to Pay, which is used to do the procurement itself. Then we have SAP Ariba Buying. So this and this are relatively the same, except that in this solution we have the invoicing part as well, but in this solution we don't have the invoicing. Okay, so these are the different solutions offered by SAP Ariba. So there are other solutions as well, like commerce automation, supply chain collaboration. Okay, so these solutions are more related to direct procurement. Okay, so we are not going to cover this in this course. Okay, now let's understand what is the source to pay cycle. The source to pay cycle starts with sourcing. Once sourcing is completed, then we move on to the contract management. Once we have the contract established, we have the ordering, where we place or send the purchase orders to the suppliers and receive the goods. Then we have the payment. So in this phase, the supplier sends the invoice, we do the reconciliation, and we make the payment to the supplier. So let's understand what is sourcing, what is contract management, what is ordering, what is payment, and finally we will look at how Ariba is going to help us in performing the activities involved in each of these phases. Okay, so let's understand sourcing first. So what is sourcing? Sourcing means identify the source of the goods or services. So sourcing is performed to identify the source of the goods or services. So let's take the example of laptop. Okay. Now you have a car manufacturing company. Okay. So let's say your IT department needs 100 new laptops because they are expecting 100 new joinees in that department. Okay. So what is the requirement here? Requirement is IT department needs 100 laptops. Okay. Now, so what is going to happen based on this request? So what happens is this request is sent to the sourcing department. So there will be a sourcing department in every organization which is responsible to source the or to identify the source of the goods or services. To to make it very simple, so their job, for example, in this case of the 100 laptops, is to find a suitable supplier for this 100 laptops. Okay, so that is their role, the sourcing department. Okay, so when the request is sent to the sourcing department, so generally, consider you are buying the laptop for yourself. So what do? Forget about back in those days when we don't have Amazon, Flipkart, or any other e-commerce applications. So what we used to do, when we need to purchase, let's say, a laptop, so we used to physically go to different vendors, right? For example, HP, Dell, then Lenovo, Acer, right? So we physically visit these different vendors. We give our requirement. So what is our requirement? That we need, let's say, 1 TB of laptop. We need Intel Core i5 processor, and we need a 15-inch laptop. So we give our requirements to the vendor, and we'll get the quotation from them, right? We get the price of the laptop from these different vendors. Then we compare the quotations that we receive from these vendors, and then finally decide who is going to be our final supplier, right? Or we are going to decide from whom we are going to purchase the laptop, correct? That is what we used to do back in those days when we did not have these e-commerce applications, right? Now, in the same way, so when something is needed for an organization, so that request is sent to the sourcing team. So the sourcing team also performs these similar activities that we perform while purchasing anything. So back in the days when there was no digital procurement application, right? So it was a very labor intensive work for the sourcing team. So imagine they need to purchase 100 laptops. So what they have to do? They have to physically visit these different vendors, get quotations, compare these quotations, and finally identify one couple of vendors. So if there was no digital procurement application, so the sourcing team has to visit physically, or they have to call these vendors and get the quotations, compare them. So all this is a manual activity which is paper intensive as well, right? So there is a lot of paperwork that was involved to do any sourcing activity back in the days when there was no digital procurement. But with the invention or with the invent of Ariba procurement application, so the sourcing team can sit at their desk and perform all these activities using their laptops. Also, there is no paper involved, and if there is any information that is needed of the past events, they can very well track the history as well. So that is the advantage of using a digital procurement application. So coming back to sourcing, sourcing is identify the source of goods or services. So our requirement is that the IT department needs 100 laptops, right? So the request is so sent to the sourcing department. Then what the sourcing team does is using the Ariba application or any digital procurement application, sourcing team publishes an RFI, or can say request for information to various vendors slash supplier. Vendor is nothing but the supplier. Okay, right? So for example, in our case, let's consider these are the 5 vendors to which the sourcing team has published the RFI. So RFI is nothing but request for information. So they ask various questions to these suppliers to sort of shortlist some of them for further rounds. Okay. So here the sourcing team is not asking anything about the price. Okay. Using RFI, they are seeking additional information from the suppliers. Okay. So once the sourcing team publishes this RFI, the suppliers respond to this RFI. Okay. So there are various questions asked to supplier. The suppliers answer on those questions. Based on the answers or response from the vendors, sourcing team shortlist, let's say, 3 suppliers for further rounds. Okay. So let's say out of HP, Dell, Lenovo, we have shortlisted these 3 vendors. Okay, I am not satisfied with the answers provided by Acer or Microsoft. Okay, so you can consider this request for information as a screening of your resume. Whenever you apply for a job, first you are shortlisted based on your resume, right? So the information that you present on your resume gives an idea to the employer whether you are suitable for that particular position or not. So similarly, based on the response given by the suppliers to this RFI, so they analyze whether that particular supplier is suitable for this requirement or not. Okay. Supplier sourcing team has published the RFI, so these 5 vendors have responded to the RFI. So based on the response to the RFI, the sourcing team has shortlisted these 3 vendors, HP, Dell, and Lenovo. So then sourcing team publishes the RFP or RFQ, which is request for quotation or request for price. So as we can understand from the wordings, so in this request for quotation or request for price, the sourcing team is seeking the price information for the 100 laptops from these 3 vendors. Okay. So then the suppliers respond to the RFQ. So based on the response, sourcing team can finalize the vendor or may decide to conduct an auction. Okay. So let's say these three vendors have responded to the RFQ. Let's say HP has quoted 200 USD. Okay. Dell has quoted 220. Okay. And Lenovo has quoted 180. Okay. So these are the quotations that the sourcing team has received from the vendors. Now the sourcing team, based on these responses, can, if they are happy with the price that they have received from the vendors, they can finalize the vendor, or if they are not happy with the price, they can conduct an auction to you know uh, encourage the vendors to compete among themselves. So what is an auction? So as you know, what is an auction, right? So let's say you're selling a you're selling your car. So when you're selling your car, you want to sell it at a highest possible price, right? Correct. You will encourage your bidders to bid as high as possible, right? Because you want to profit from selling your car. Now that is called forward auction, because you are selling something. But in this case, the sourcing team is conducting an auction to purchase something or to buy something, which is, in our case, it is 100 laptops. So it is called reverse auction, because this auction is being conducted to buy something, not sell. So if we conduct an auction to buy something, it is called reverse auction. So if the sourcing team is not satisfied with the quotations given in the RFQ phase, they can conduct an auction, right? So which will encourage the suppliers to bid. So what is the sourcing team expecting here? To get a lower quote than what they have received in the RFQ phase, right? That is why they are conducting auction. Okay. So they are not happy with this 200, 220, 180. So let's say their target is $170 per laptop. So they will conduct an auction and encourage these three vendors to submit bids. Okay. The vendors then respond or participate in the auction. Okay. So in the auction, let's say HP further reduces. So in a reverse auction, our goal is to get the quote at the lowest price possible, right? So when you are buying something, you want to buy it at the lowest price possible. When you are selling something, you want to sell it at the highest price possible. So let's say HP has further reduced to 195. Okay. Then Dell has reduced it to 205. Okay. For 205. And Lenovo has reduced it to 179. Okay. So these are the final prices that we have received from these vendors for our 100 laptops. So the sourcing team analyzes the bids that they have received, then finally decides that, let's say, they go with Lenovo and HP. Okay. So sourcing team has decided to award the contract for 100 laptops to HP and Lenovo. Okay. So in most cases, based on the requirement, they go for multiple vendors. Why should they go for multiple vendors? Let's say you need 100 laptops and you only awarded the contract to Lenovo. So you send a purchase order to the Lenovo, but the Lenovo has some issue at their facility, they are not able to fulfill your order, and you end up waiting for those 100 laptops or let's say 10 laptops, and your work is delayed. So work delayed is profit missed for the organization. So to avoid those sort of situations, they go for multiple vendors so that in case there is an issue with one particular vendor, they can rely on other vendors as well. Okay, clear? So so finally, the sourcing team has actually identified the source for 100 laptops, right? So that is what we define sourcing, right? Sourcing is identify the source of goods or services. So sourcing team started published the RFI based on the responses that we received. They have shortlisted these three vendors for RFQ. They were then the sourcing team published the RFQ. Suppliers responded to the RFQ. Based on the response, the sourcing team was not happy with the response received to the RFQ, so they decided to conduct an auction. And the in the auction, the vendors further reduced the price of the laptop. The sourcing team was happy with the quotation received. Then they decided to award the contract to HP and Lenovo. So the sourcing team has performed its duty of identifying the source for these 100 laptops. So all these steps, whatever we have discussed, can be performed using the Ariba sourcing application. So that is why we need Ariba sourcing application. Let's understand finished the sourcing phase of the source to pay cycle. So we have identified the source here using Ariba sourcing application. Let's say we have performed all the activities that we have discussed. Then the next step is to establish a contract with the suppliers, right? So when you are doing business, so you're basically doing business with these two vendors, right? You have decided to purchase when you're transacting nothing but you are doing business with these two vendors which we have finalized, Lenovo and HP. So in the contracts management, we establish the contract with these two vendors that we have finalized. Okay. So what happens in contract management is contract is drafted, it is sent for review within the organization first. Okay. So there will be a different team who is responsible for preparing this or working on the contracts. Okay. So once the vendor has been or up or open plot, you get into an agreement with your vendor, right? Whoever is selling the plot and whoever is buying the plot, they need to have a agreed set of terms and conditions. All those terms and conditions are drafted as an agreement, then they are reviewed, and then you finally register that document, right? So similarly, whenever a supplier has been finalized and we have decided to purchase something from that supplier, we or the buying organization and the supplier organization get into an agreement and agree on the terms and conditions of the purchase. Contract management module of Ariba helps in performing all these activities wherein a contract will be drafted and it is sent to review within the organization. Then the contract is sent to the supplier for review. Supplier reviews the contract. Supplier then the supplier reviews the contract. Supplier can, based on the terms mentioned in the contract, supplier will either accept or suggest or completely reject the contract. Okay. So what happens is you draft the terms and conditions, you send it to your legal department. Legal department says this is fine. Then the contract is sent to supplier. Supplier goes through that contract, checks the terms and conditions. The supplier is okay. Then the supplier will accept the contract. If they feel that some clauses need to be changed on the contract, they can very well suggest those changes, or they can complete. If they are not at all happy with the contract, they can reject the contract. So let's say the supplier accepted the contract, then supplier and buyer digitally sign the contract. So we have to have the signature as well, right? So only if the contract is signed, then both the parties, buyer and the supplier, are legally entitled to bind to the terms and conditions of the contract. If it is not signed, then they are not legally bound to uh, you know agree to the terms and conditions, right? So all these activities of contract management, where the contract is drafted, sent for review, and then sent for the supplier to review, supplier accepting the contract or suggesting any changes, and both parties digitally signing the contract, can be performed using the Ariba contracts management module. So that's why we need the Ariba contracts module. So using the sourcing application, we identify the source of the goods or services. Once the source or the supplier is identified, we establish a contract with the supplier. Clear? So with this, we have completed the sourcing and the contract management phase of the sourced phase cycle. Next comes the ordering phase. So what is ordering? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Just to summarize, so we need the Ariba sourcing application to perform the sourcing activities. We need the contracts module to perform the Ariba contract management. So let's understand what is ordering. So then we have the contract established. The next step is to, you know, so we have, let's say we have the contract established for the 100 laptops. Now the company is not going to need the 100 laptops in a single go, right? So they will require, let's say, in intervals of 10. So let's say uh, every month they require 10 laptops. So what the buying company does is they first create a PR, or purchase requisition. Okay. So what does this purchase requisition contain? Contains the item to be purchased, quantity, how much quantity of that item is needed, who is the supplier of that item, need by date, by when that item is needed, okay, the price of the item, then the ship to location, to where the items needs to be delivered. Okay, so all these elements are captured on the purchase requisition. So in our example, if we stick with the laptop, then so we will purchase, let's say, 10 laptops. Okay, okay. So the agreed price with Lenovo is, let's say the supplier is Lenovo. Okay, and the agreed price per laptop is 179, right? So it may be case where while drafting the contract, we discuss the discount as well with the supplier, and they say that if you purchase 10 laptops at a single time, we will provide you a discount of, let's say, $5 per laptop. We can also do that in Ariba. Okay, so let's consider there is no discount at the moment. Okay, so the price is $179. The quantity is 10. Supplier is Lenovo, and let's say we need the laptops by 15th of May, and the laptops should be shipped to Hyderabad. Okay, so all these details are captured on the requisition. So there is a different team called buyers actually, or yeah, so they are called buyers. So they are responsible to create these requisitions. Okay, so these buyers are nothing but the end users of the Ariba application. Okay, so they create this requisition, okay, within Ariba or any other procurement application. Once the requisition is created and submitted, requisition goes through an approval. Okay, so let's consider you are buying a laptop. You don't have any job, okay, right? But you need a laptop. Let's say you are a student, you need a laptop to perform your college project activities. Okay. Now, for you, who is the source for that, or who is the provider of the income for that laptop? Your parents, right? Because at the moment you do not have any income, so you need to depend on your parents to purchase that laptop, right? So before buying the laptop, you go and seek approval, or you go and take approval from your parents. Hey mom, hey dad, can I purchase this laptop? I need the laptop to perform these activities, right? Only if they give you an approval, you will go ahead and place the order, right? Similarly, whenever something is being purchased or procured within the organization, so that spend needs to be approved by someone in the organization. So there will be certain people in the organization who are responsible to approve the spend in the organization. So any request of purchase will go through that particular team. They will review all the details on the requisition, and if everything is fine, and if they feel that they need that particular item, they will go ahead and approve that item. Only then the item can be bought. Okay, so that's why the requisition goes through an approval. Now, otherwise, if there is no approval, so everyone will purchase anything, and there will be no tracking and no approval, and the amount of the organization will be used like anything. I mean, there is no control on how the amount is being spent within the organization, right? So that's why, to create a transparency, to understand where the spend is going, we have to set up a approval for every purchase in a given organization. Okay, so that's why the requisition goes through an approval. Once the requisition is approved, then a purchase order is generated. Purchase order is generated automatically. Okay, so this purchase requisition is an internal document. Okay, it is not sent to the supplier. But once the purchase requisition is approved, then a purchase order is generated. This purchase order or PO is sent to the supplier. Okay, so there are various mechanisms using which the PO is sent to the supplier in Ariba. We'll discuss that in the coming sessions. Okay, how the PO is transferred to the supplier. So the PO is sent to the supplier. Then, based on the details in the purchase order, supplier ships the goods. In our case, it is laptops, right? So it is similar to what you do on Myntra or Amazon or any other e-commerce application. So you add the items to the cart, then you place the order. That order details are sent to the seller. The seller then ships the goods. Then either you can make the payment as cash on delivery, or you can make the payment upfront. So similarly, based on the payment terms agreed with the supplier, we can make the payment to the supplier as well for the laptops. So the supplier, then once the PO is sent to the supplier, supplier ships the goods, then buyer receives the goods, right? Buyer receives the goods. Then supplier sends the invoice. Okay. Buyer makes the payment. Okay. So this is how, using the Ariba buying and invoicing module, we can perform the various activities that are involved in the ordering and the payment phases of the source to pay cycle. So it starts with the requisition. The requisition contains details like what is the item that is being procured or purchased, the quantity of that item, the supplier, when is that item needed, what is the price of the item, and what is the shipped location. Of course, there are other various elements as well, but I cannot give you the details of that because you will not understand. These are the generic details that are available. So then once the requisition is submitted, it goes through a approval. Once the approvers approve the requisition, a purchase order is automatically generated. So when the PO is generated, whatever information that we have given on the requisition, that is automatically copied onto the PO. Okay. So the same information which is there on the PR is also present on the PO. There are some elements which are not sent to the supplier because it is an external document, right, which is being sent to the supplier. So we don't want certain information to be sent to the supplier. So the PO is sent to the supplier. Supplier ships the goods. So in our case, it is the laptops. Buyer receives the goods. Supplier sends the invoice. Buyer makes the payment. Okay. So all these activities, as I mentioned, can be performed using the Ariba buying and invoicing module. So what is the difference between Ariba buying and Ariba buying and invoicing? In this, we can only receive, we can only perform the goods receipt or receive the goods. We cannot capture the invoice sent by the supplier using this solution. Whereas if you use this solution, you can also capture the invoice sent by the supplier. If you use this solution, you have to perform the invoicing in a different system. Okay, so that is the difference between Ariba buying and invoicing. So in this manner, using all these solutions, we can perform the various activities involved in the source to pay cycle. Any questions, team? Yeah, we'll discuss in the question. So we did not discuss the SAP Ariba SLP module, right? So what is the use of, I'm coming to that actually. I was going to come to that. So SLP, as I said, is supplier. So SLP is used to manage the suppliers that a given organization has. Okay. So you can create a new supplier, you can update an existing supplier, you can delete a supplier using SLP, you can uh, track the performance based on various parameters of the supplier. You can mark a supplier as a preferred supplier. You can mark a supplier as a qualified supplier using Ariba SLP. So SLP is used to manage the vendors that the given organization has. So any organization has a lot of vendors. Okay, so particularly the bigger organization has vendors in thousands. So it is not easy to manage those vendors. So that's where the use of Ariba SLP comes in. So they can manage all those thousand vendors using the Ariba SLP application. So they can create any new vendors, they can update the new any existing vendors, they can delete certain vendors using Ariba SLP. Okay, so that is the use of Ariba SLP. So we understood what is sourcing, what is contract management, ordering, payment. Then we understood how all these solutions of SAP Ariba help in performing the activities that are involved in sourcing, contract, ordering, and payment. So, what is the role of a consultant, right? So, that is why I believe all you guys are here to become an Ariba consultant. So, whatever we have discussed so far is the usage and how Ariba can be used, or what is Ariba and how it can be used. Now, as a consultant, right? So, your job is to set up or configure these solutions as per the requirement from the clients. Okay. So, that is your job, or that is your role as a Ariba consultant. So, I'll just give you a brief example considering the sourcing application. So in SAP Ariba sourcing, while discussing about the sourcing phase, we mentioned that we will, or the sourcing team publishes an RFI, right? And and we mentioned that in RFI, we will ask various questions to the suppliers. So as a consultant, first we need to ensure that the supplier is there in the system, right? Without that data, the end users cannot use the application. Agree? So our job as a consultant is to ensure that all the data which is necessary to perform these transactions is present in the is present in the application, and to set up the rules that are required to govern the procurement policies of the organization. Okay, so that is our job as a consultant. Now, considering the sourcing, so we said that we will send various questions in the RFI phase of the sourcing, right? So, as a consultant, I will explain how we can set up those questions in the RFI phase to the end user. Then they will give us what are the questions that they want to ask to the suppliers. So based on the questions given by the client, we set up those questions in the system. So whenever the sourcing team creates an RFI event, they will make use of those questions which are predefined and send it to the suppliers. Clear? So that is our job as a consultant. They might face any issues due using these applications. So as a consultant, we need to understand what is the issue that they are facing and help in resolving that issue. For example, when it comes to buying and invoicing, so the end user creates a requisition. Okay, the requisition, let's say the user says it did not go to the right approver. He was expecting the request should have gone to X approver, but it went to Y approver. So he will come and ask you, hey buddy, I've created this request. I was expecting it to go to X person, but it went to Y person. Can you please check why? So as a consultant, you will go and check the configuration that is in place and help the person understand why it went to Y person. Then you can correct it so that it will go to the X person. Okay, clear? So that was just as an example. So there are other various activities that as a consultant we need to perform to set up the application with the data and provide it to the client so that they can perform all the transactions that we have just discussed. So as I mentioned, to become an Ariba consultant, you need not have any sort of procurement background, or any programming language is not required. Okay, so you need to understand how to use a application. So you need to have analytical skills, logical skills, and the patience to put in some effort every day to learn the application. That's it. So hardly it will take a month or 45 days to learn the application and another month to practice it. Once you are ready, then you can become a very good consultant. Okay. So you just need to understand English to be precise. If you understand English, it is easy to learn SAP Ariba. So during this course, it will be a real time project that we are going to do. We are going to implement buying, buying and invoicing, sourcing contracts. We'll consider that there is a client that we are working. We are will consider that we are getting requirements from them and then implement all these applications as per their requirement. So it will be a complete real-time experience for you. Okay. So and you will be very easily understanding the processes that are involved in setting up the applications. Okay. Any questions?
So why are we not including commerce automation and supply chain collaboration? Like, is it not required for who want to go in the, like Ariba consultant, that kind of profiles?
Yeah. So the thing is, we don't have that application ready with us. So we are trying to get the
Okay.
licenses for those as well. But at the moment, we don't have the license for those applications. So that is the reason we have.
So is it good to learn that part also?
It is good to learn, but majorly these are the solutions that are used by many of the clients.
Hmm.
So it is a good
Okay.
start, I would say. If you go directly to learn supply chain collaboration or commerce automation, it would be difficult for you to understand the Ariba landscape. So this indirect
Oh,
procurement application is a very good start for you because m- majorly, as I said, Ariba is catering to indirect procurement, whereas commerce automation and supply chain collaboration is used for direct procurement. So it will be
so
difficult
that is
for
for
you to.
direct.
Yes, that is for direct.
Hmm. So I am like a end user of SAP Ariba because I
Okay.
am into procurement and sourcing background.
Okay.
So
Okay.
is it enough for me? These topics are enough for me if I exclude the commerce automation and supply chain collaboration. If I want to go towards, SAP
Hmm.
Ariba consultant roles.
No, I would not say it will be because, as I said, so they are in the market, they are looking for someone who has
Mm.
experience on Ariba indirect procurement application, specifically Ariba
Mm.
buying and invoicing, sourcing,
Mm.
contracts, and SLP,
Mm.
and bit of
Okay.
integration knowledge.
Okay, which you will cover, right?
Yes, yes, we will cover all of them. These steps are not specific to Ariba. So any sort of digital procurement application generally follow these sort of framework steps that I have mentioned. Okay, so that these are not specific to Ariba. So generally sourcing is performed in that manner. Okay.
Are you going to give the sandbox access for practice during this course
Yes, you will get the access.
from day one?
Not from day one, maybe from day two or
Mm.
day three.
But early
So
only, not like after a month.
yeah, yeah, no, 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 not after a month
Oh.
because uh, you need to practice regularly, right? So after the course is completed, if you try to practice whatever you have learned
Hmm.
during that month, you will lose it.
Yes.
So you have to practice regularly. What I do with my existing batch is every Monday or any day of the week, I give them the chance to go and go hands-on in the system with me guiding them. Okay. So it's not like I will leave it to you to completely. No, there is one dedicated session every week that is sort of a hands-on for you guys. So that way I know where you are lagging and I can guide you. So you can put the effort in the right direction. And that will give you actually a lot of
Also,
confidence as well. So I'll just, open the Ariba application just to show you how it looks like. Okay. So this is the Ariba cloud-based application. Okay. So there is nothing that we need to install on our systems. Cloud cloud-based application means all the infrastructure that is needed to run this application is maintained by SAP itself. So we need not take care of any hardware or any infrastructure. So they will provide a URL to the client, and the client can log into the or access the Ariba application using that URL. So it's like you are logging into your Gmail. You have your user ID and the password, right? Nothing else. And then you are good to access the Gmail. So similarly, you will have a user ID, a password, and a dedicated link using which you can access the Ariba application. Okay, here, so I'll just quickly create one requisition just to show you how the requisition looks like. Okay, so this is how the requisition looks like. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have the item that we want to purchase, right? So here commodity code is nothing but the item, the quantity, the price, who is the vendor or the supplier, right? And then I mentioned that we'll have the address as well, right? To where the item needs to be shipped. So here if you see the shipping section, we have the ship to location, and we have the need by date as well. So as I mentioned, there are other details as well. So we will understand how all these other details are set up in the system and how we can create the requisition. So what as a consultant we need to do to ensure that we are able to create the requisition without any issues. Okay, so I'll submit it. So as I mentioned, once we submit the requisition, it will go through an approval process. So as a consultant, we will take the requirements from the clients and set up the approval process as per their requirements. So every client has a different approval process, right? So this is not happening by default, right? We need to go and configure the approval process in the system as per the requirement of the client. As I mentioned, once the PO it is approved, order is automatically generated, right? So we have the order ID here, right? So if you see the history, it says PO was successfully sent via Ariba network to Visualpath demo vendor. That means the supplier has received this PO. Okay. Then what happens is the supplier physically ships the goods. The requester of the PO verifies those goods and completes the goods receipt in Ariba. Submit. Done. It is received now. Right? We'll stop this demo sessions. Hope you are clear with what is procurement, the categories of procurement, direct versus indirect procurement, where in the world of procurement Ariba is useful, what are the different solutions offered by Ariba, what is source to pay cycle, what are the different phases, and how each of the solutions of SAP Ariba is useful in fulfilling or performing the activities involved in the phases of S2P cycle. Any questions? Please do let me know. And how was the demo? Any feedback? happy to you know take the feedback. Was I fast? Was I slow? Was I communicating clearly?